So if you're not aware, Matt Hayes of USA Today is somebody who very often writes articles, very much so in favor of the SEC. I wouldn't quite put him on the Peter Burns, pedestal or anything like that with some of
Hold
his
on.
stuff.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Nobody is Peter Burns. Peter
Okay.
Burns is like he's like a level onto himself. Like he's worse than Paul Feinbaum. Carry
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. But Matt is definitely somebody that heavily leans toward the SEC. And so I saw this article this morning. It posted at 4:50 a.m. So Matt got this out there early in the morning. It says Big Ten has stolen SEC mojo and it isn't about to give it back. This is an opinion piece by Matt. I'll just kind of read the intro to the article and then there's some other parts with it. Whoops. I don't know why it went there.
Are you planning a trip to Universal? Is that
I
what's
am not.
happening?
No, I cannot afford a trip to Universal. We just went to Disney. All right. So the article starts like this, and then Zach and I will kind of get into it and maybe reference some other points as we talk about it. It says the Big Ten has stolen the SEC mojo. Better teams, better players, better stories, better present, and more potentially damning, better future. The playing field has been leveled out as far as finances and things like that, said Michigan basketball head coach Dusty May, whose team is one of the two Big Ten teams to advance to Saturday's Final Four. But don't get stuck on basketball, where the Big Ten hasn't won a national championship since 2000. Matt couldn't help himself from saying that. And currently, has two teams alive in the NCAA tournament that then does the SEC, which has none. The paradigm change 5 years in the making, running parallel with the explosion of NIL, free player movement. This is the Big Ten flexing and the SEC retreating. So Matt is really towing the line here. He is definitely in favor of some SEC or some Big Ten stuff, and them taking over a little bit. But I also sense Matt being pretty dismissive of the Big Ten actually getting better and just kind of wanting to blame it on the money and everything like that. So Zach, as you were reading this article and just from what you've seen opinion wise and everything else out there, do you feel like the perception of the Big Ten versus the SEC, with the Big Ten being better than the SEC now, do you feel like there is a true shift in college football with that perception happening or not? Or what are your thoughts?
Well, so I think the digs, and he has more of those digs throughout the article, kind of tell the story. In that I think to be taken credibly, you have to be like optimistic about the Big Ten. Like you cannot look at the results, even in basketball. Like the SEC, I mean, Michigan just obliterated Tennessee in what was the only Elite Eight matchup for an SEC team. You look at football, you look at basketball, you just look across the landscape. The Big Ten, just statistically, has surpassed the SEC over the past 3 years. And so to be taken seriously as a mainstream football journalist at this point, you kind of have to admit it. It's not like when we were coming on here 2 years ago and saying we think the Big Ten is going to be better. Like, right? Like we were staking a claim, just like, we're going to give Doug and Bill all the credit when they made Kings of the North. Like guys like them, guys like us, we took a stand and said, hey, we think the Big Ten's better. At this point, to be taken seriously, you have to admit it. That doesn't mean you have to like it. And so I think there's legitimate journalism. And then I think there are people who just don't want to get left behind. So I'm not going to say anything negative about people that we report on. I'm just going to say the tone of how a piece is written kind of tells you whether they want to go here or they feel like they need to go here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Matt is writing this article in such a way that it's like you almost have to say stuff like that, especially with Paul Feinbaum essentially saying the same stuff now, which Paul Feinbaum obviously a big talking piece for the SEC, but he has come out and credit to him, he after the playoffs happened, he was one of the first ones to come out and say, look, the Big Ten is better than the SEC right now. Now I think pretty much all of those SEC guys, as Matt does in this article as well, pretty much kind of hedge that a little bit with like, yeah, the top of the Big Ten is better than the SEC. I don't know what results have happened to make people think that the middle of the SEC is, by far better or undoubtedly better or anything like that. I understand there's a few games that people can point to here and there. Oklahoma did beat Michigan. I would say there were, some circumstances in that game that makes it a little bit different in things like that. But at the same time, it's the conference that says it just means more, but then decides they don't want it to mean more when when it's bowl games and stuff like that. So it's pretty ridiculous. It's pretty crazy. And I think that you're right. The people like Matt are out here right now just saying what they have to say, but also hedging it in such a way that it's like, well, if only the SEC wasn't poor, which is exactly what we've seen in recruiting and everything else. And also, Dan Lanning had one of the best quotes on it last year when he said, some people utilize NIL and some people, want to make excuses for why they're not good. And that's pretty much what the SEC is doing right now, in my opinion. Don't you think so?
Yeah. Well, and I think, you wanted to talk about, is Big Ten dominance solely about money?
Yeah, that's where I was going with this.
And yeah, and no. So first of all, who was paying players first? Who had the unfair advantage? It was the SEC. It's been well documented. And were there other programs doing it too? Sure. But we know for sure that the entire league of the SEC was doing it. Like it's well documented. And so essentially what the Big Ten has done with NIL is the playing field has been leveled. So that's one thought. But I want to go back to the top of the article real quick because I want to just point out what he says: better teams, better players, better stories, better present, better future. Do you see anything in that quote about coaching? I'm gonna switch cameras because my camera froze. So let me switch cameras
You're
here.
good. No, I can take it for a minute while you switch cameras.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't, and it's one of the things that guys like, I don't want to say guys like Matt because I haven't read Matt enough to know for sure if he has never referenced this at all, but it's something that I don't think enough people are recognizing about the current landscape right now of the Big Ten having better coaches, and not only having better coaches, but having better assistants, going after more NFL type of coaching talent. So that way they're able to enhance their, not just their head coach, but the coaches alongside them as well. And quite honestly, a lot of connections with the NFL that helps with that kind of stuff too. Go on with your thought.
Well, and I think that's part of my point is that everybody that makes this about money doesn't understand the whole story. And the Big Ten has lapped the SEC in coaching. And so you look at the coaches, right? Like there's maybe 4 or 5 coaches in the SEC where you're like, they're either great or really good, right? Obviously, Kirby Smart is, has 2 national championships. I think Sark is good. I don't know if he's great. He's really good. I don't know if he's great. Clark Lee, I think, is really, really good. Kalen DeBoer was, I think, really good at Washington. He's kind of imploding Alabama right now. So, like, how do we take DeBoer? Lane Kiffin, that's hilarious, right? What
Well, Lane
what does
Kiffin
he do?
is telling his fans not to have too high of expectations. That's when
Yeah.
you have a team that is not. I mean, I'm not going to say they're not going to do very well this season, but it's obvious that Lane Kiffin doesn't feel entirely confident to be able to compete with everybody nationally. Maybe he can compete in the SEC, but he doesn't feel like he's going to compete nationally in the playoffs or anything like that if he's telling his fans, hey, don't get too high of expectations.
Yeah. So I just you look at that coaching lineup and then you compare it to what the Big Ten has top to bottom, right? Kurt Signetti has assembled the best staff in the country. Like, I will stake that claim. I think Ryan Day and Kirby Smart are closer than most people would care to admit. But I mean, we had people even outside our channel saying we think Ryan Day might be better than Kirby at this point. Now, I know the championships matter.
He still has to beat Kirby,
Yeah.
but he hasn't had a chance to do that yet. So
Yeah. But like Ryan Day is at least in the discussion with Kirby, right? And then he's clearly better than the other ones. Dan Lanning, aside from Kirby, who's better than Dan Lanning in the SEC? Like, nobody.
Who's better than Dan Lanning in the SEC?
Yeah, besides Kirby.
I would say Kirby is the one.
Yeah, just Kirby.
Yeah, I think Sark has a conversation there, but I think Sark has had some more favorable matchups in the playoffs. So I would say he's probably right there with Sark.
Yeah. So
I would take Dan Lanning.
Yeah, it's probably a thin margin. But then you look down the next 5 or 6 coaches: Whittingham, Riley, Campbell, Bielema, Ferentz. I mean, I'm taking them all over Clark Lee, who's either the 3rd or 4th best coach in that league. And like, I like Clark Lee.
Yeah. Well, and I think the thing that Clark Lee doesn't have going for him, we got a bunch of people in the chat. We're going to get to you guys' comments here in just a second. You guys got a lot of good comments. I just kind of want to finish up this thought here with Zach. The thing that Clark Lee doesn't have going for him is, like, who had similar success at Vanderbilt and came to the Big Ten and got fired? James Franklin. Oops. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying that Clark Lee is the same as James Franklin or anything like that, but I do think that, success at Vanderbilt is only going to get you so far, right?
Yeah. To be fair to that, Franklin had fairly easy schedules and didn't have a ton of big time wins at Vandy, whereas Clark Lee has.
Philip says Zack called Ferentz a good coach. Checking in.
I have never said he's a bad coach. I just said maybe he's old, which he is, and that maybe he needed to retire.
I just thought it was.
But I have walked that back, Philip, and you know that. So stop your slander.
Before we know it, Zach's going to be complimenting Mike Locksley outside of September.
Maybe. Hey. I am very fair. If you are. Do well. Oh, I know. I'm playing it up. I understand. If you do well, I give credit.
Yes, for sure. Fight on Natties came in, says Kent State flashes. What's up, fellas? What's up, Fight on Natties? Appreciate you being here. Max is here with us as well. Showed his comment earlier on fraud bomb there. Max says middle of the Big Ten is better than the SEC. Look at the bowl games the past 2 years. I would definitely use that reasoning. I don't think it's the most concrete reasoning in the world. Like, I do think that, you probably need some more wins in the out of conference and stuff like that when teams are playing full strength. But without those games, I don't think you have a whole lot else to go on. So I think you have to go on bowl games, Right. So I would like to see some more in the season matchups. I talked about a possible Big Ten SEC challenge coming yesterday with, the Big Ten SEC Volleyball Week challenge happening this season, which is really cool, really exciting. I think gives hope for something like that to happen in football or basketball at some point. But as far as I'm concerned, like, I agree with you, Max. I do think the middle of the Big Ten is better than people give it credit for. Just look at Iowa versus Vanderbilt. How that game played out. Vanderbilt thought they should have been in the playoffs. Greg Sankey thought Vanderbilt should have been in the playoffs. And if Iowa would have made the playoffs, people would have had a riot. They would have said, make the playoffs smaller because Iowa's in it. Well, turns out Iowa was a better team last season than Vanderbilt. I know they were missing their tight end, but, if you lost to Iowa because you were missing your tight end, like, I don't know. I just don't think that's as much of an impact position to lose to a team only because of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, is Grateful Trojan this is in 2024, but like a not good USC team.
And A&M too. And A&M.
Yeah, beat LSU and A&M. Now A&M was a bowl game, but still, like SC struggled to get bowl eligible in 2024 and beat 2 SEC teams.
Yep.
Like that.
And that was a game where USC didn't play at home. It was a neutral site game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
both. Yeah, bowl game and a neutral site game. I think so. Just to sum up this point, I don't want to make it seem like the coaching is head and shoulders above the SEC, but it is a significant factor to this, and people still do not give credit. They put it on the $20 million roster at Ohio State, which Matt Hayes again kind of, unfairly, I think, utilizes and says, how did Ohio State win their title? By getting a bunch of SEC players. No, they got a few, and then they retained their roster, which speaks more to the culture. Yes, they had money to throw around. Like, sure. There's a lot of other schools that have money to throw around, and they're not doing as well. Texas A&M being one of them. Money is not everything.
I love how the narrative changes, right? Fight on 90s with a great comment here. We'll get to that in just a second, but I just love how the narrative changes, right? Indiana, they just got a whole bunch of James Madison players, and that's a bunch of 27-year-olds, and they had that all happen. And then you read an article like this, well, they just bought a whole bunch of SEC players. I'm confused. Who did they get? Did they get SEC players, or did they get James Madison players, or did they get 30-year-olds? I'm confused at this point. Yeah. Who did they get? Because apparently Indiana just found the jackpot of everything out there to get every player imaginable that was perfect for taking down the SEC. Oh, wait, it's not that. It's that the Big Ten has the ability to pay players now, in addition to the SEC as well. And the Big Ten has always had the better coaching. And you're seeing that play up now with not just getting better players with being able to pay them, but also more investment in football, investment in the coaching staffs. And also, this needs to be talked about as well, smarter usage of money as well. If you are not paying attention right now, one thing that Ohio State is doing that is, and they talked about it on the College Football Inquirer, so it's not even just me coming out here talking about this. They talked about it on, an SEC slightly leaning show a little bit with Ross Dellinger and Andy Staples and those guys, which I'm not trying to bash them. I like that show. I think Stephen Godfrey is actually really funny, even though he is kind of an SEC honk a little bit. But it's actually one of my podcasts I love to listen to the most. Anyway, even with all of that going on, like, you still have to admit that the Big Ten is not only has more money, but the Big Ten is being smarter with their money as well. There's a reason why Texas is going out and spending $40 million. There's a reason why LSU has spent $40 million on their roster. And these teams are still not the number one team in the country, right? Texas was the number one team in the country last year. I'm going to be honest. I know we were just talking about Sark there for a little bit with, comparison to Dan Lanning. I'll be honest, if Sark loses to Ryan Day and Ohio State at home in week 2, I'm not saying he's on the hot seat, but I think that seat's getting pretty warm, because I think Texas fans are eventually going to look at it and say, dude, how much money do we have to give you?
Yeah.
For you to go beat a Big Ten team.
Well, and they're paying.
I mean, he did beat Michigan in the bowl game, so I shouldn't say a Big Ten team, but a contending Big Ten team. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, but a shell of a Big Ten team, like.
True, but we don't use that excuse for the SEC, so we can't use that.
That's fair. That's fair. But yeah, I just think there's a lot of backhanded and underhanded comments, and it's not just Hayes. Like, I'm not like, it is.
This article from Hayes is more of a example than anything else. We're not trying to directly take shots at Matt Hayes here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but and I mean, even just part of it is you go back to last year, and it took until the playoffs, and really it took until Indiana beat the Jimmy out of Alabama for people to be like, oh, like the Big Ten's actually legit. Like, even during bowl season, people were like, well, the issue is that the SEC rosters don't have the same type of talent. But like, even if you look at Josh Pate, who I love Josh Pate, but before and after bowl season, or like during bowl season and then after the playoff, during the bowl season where Big Ten's racking up wins, he's like, you can't really look at it as a data point. After the playoff, like he started to change his tune a little bit about not just about bowl season, but the playoff in general. Now, he would still, and I think rightly, argue that you cannot take bowl season as like the main data point. You never really could, but I think he stood on that. I appreciate that. But his mentality has shifted towards the Big Ten, and it was because finally, after the third season in a row, when someone other than Michigan and Ohio State just beat the Jimmy out of an SEC team, like just beat them up, and then did the same thing to Oregon. That's what it took, and it shouldn't have taken that long. It should have been after Ohio State ran roughshod and Penn State made the semifinal, and like it should have been in 2024 when you're like, oh yeah, things are changing. But it took until January 1st of 2026 for people to kind of wake up and be like, oh, this is a problem.
A lot of really good comments. Unfortunately, we can't get to all of them in the chat. I'll try to get to a few. We'll kind of go rapid fire here a little bit. But Fight on Natty's comment here reminded me of this graphic that Stats of War put out, Parker Fleming on Twitter, which these are not his metrics. These are Bill Connolly's 2026 SP Plus that he has here on a graph. But Fight on Natty says, gentlemen, Iowa, Washington, Minnesota, Nebraska, SC, MSU, Illinois on a neutral side, I would take these programs over the SEC's so-called middle programs any day of the week. And I am in agreement with Fight on Natty's here. And I think that, there is still SEC, I don't want to say propaganda, because I do think that SP Plus does a pretty good job with some of their numbers. I think they have issues in some areas, especially in areas that I'll point out here in this one. But, you're telling me that you look at the difference here between South Carolina and Minnesota. You're telling me that South Carolina is a better team, gap wise than Ohio State is over Georgia. Like it's great that they're giving Ohio State their credit here, and they're giving Oregon their credit here, and they're giving Indiana their credit here, but they're still not giving enough credit to Indiana in this situation. I mean, obviously we'll have to see Indiana play next season before anything like that. But as far as I'm concerned, like at least from what we've seen from this Indiana squad and the way Georgia is going, I can't say with 100% certainty that Indiana and Georgia are even. From what we see from South Carolina and PJ Fleck, I can't say with any certainty that South Carolina is better than Minnesota. I wouldn't. I'm not trying to say like Minnesota is undoubtedly better, but what have I seen from South Carolina to make me think they're going to be undoubtedly better than Minnesota? You know, like when Minnesota gets a 10-win season, everybody's like, yeah, good for them. That's nice, but it doesn't really mean anything. South Carolina gets a 10-win season, and everybody's like, they should be in the playoffs. Shane Beamer's a good coach. It's like, okay, who consistently goes over their win total every single year? Yeah, PJ Fleck. Florida is not that much better than Illinois than what we're seeing here on this graph. I mean, I could go on and on, but any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, and I just think I think SP Plus, and this is for next year. This is for 2026. It's so much projection with recruiting rankings. It's so much projection like in that space and returning production and all that stuff. And it's just weighted. I mean, it's similar to I forget what the metric we looked at a couple weeks ago, but like how they rate returning production. And like the percentages are just baffling. It's like, I get that you're trying to make a predictive formula and that it's in some ways it's worked, but it's like, man, you got to fudge the numbers so much to kind of make it work. And it's like, well, that's going to have inherent bias to it. Same thing here. And listen, I mean, I'll go on the other side here. Like, yeah, Ohio State, like, I think their roster's probably one of the best in the country, if not the best in the country. But also, like, I have real concerns about some of their defensive losses. Like, you don't lose 4 potentially top 10 picks, 3 of them on defense without feeling it. So I almost am frustrated with SP Plus in general. And I get nothing is perfect. But even to that point, like, are we really sure that Alabama is better than Michigan, USC, and Penn State and Washington? And heck, Iowa? Like, have we are we sure that Oklahoma? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma will get the benefit of finding out in that game against Michigan, which I'm thankful for to see that one. But I can't tell you with any type of certainty that Oklahoma is better than USC this season, right? I can't tell you with any kind of certainty that Oklahoma is better than Michigan this season. In fact, I'd lean Michigan and USC both being better than Oklahoma. Thankfully, we'll get to see it on the field with Michigan. But, Grateful Trojans right here as well. It says, and Auburn basically even with Iowa. Yeah, I mean, you've got Auburn, South Carolina, even with Iowa. Apparently, Florida better than Iowa. Listen, I know Florida got really Billy Napier, and that was huge for them. But I still do not see a Florida team that is better than an Iowa team in this situation. We'll see what the season looks like, but I just don't see it. Final comment here, and then we'll move on. Zach, Grateful Trojan with another comment. Grateful Trojan doing a great job in the chat today. We appreciate you being here. The 9-game conference schedule is going to shatter the SEC when they all are sitting at 9-3 or 8-4. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why you see so many, win totals on FanDuel so much lower for the SEC this season than we've seen before. Alabama's sitting at 8.5. LSU is sitting at 8.5 right now. I mean, Arkansas is a team that normally sits at like 5.5, 6.5. They're 4.5 this season. Probably not going to make a bowl game, right? And they're actually favored to go under 4.5 on FanDuel. So, you look at all this stuff. Florida is 7.5. You're telling me Florida has a one win, a 1-win difference in their win total than Alabama? I think that says more about the fall of Alabama than it does anything about Florida.
Yeah.
So,
agreed.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think it's really interesting. I think it's interesting conversation. I'm really looking forward to the season to be able to see how it plays out. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll see most of it until the bowl game, but we will at least get to see Ohio State, Texas. We'll get to see Oklahoma, Michigan. Any other Big Ten SEC matchups I'm missing?
I don't think so. Let me just look here real quick.
I don't think I am either. I mean, we'll see Purdue and Michigan State versus Notre Dame, or Wisconsin and Purdue against Notre Dame. I think they might be playing Michigan State too.
Yeah, they do. They do play Michigan State.
Yeah. So we'll see some of that stuff, but we probably won't see most of this until the bowl season.
Yeah, it's only Ohio State, Texas, and Michigan, Oklahoma.
So interesting stuff. All right, Zach, any final thoughts before we move on here?
Let me just make sure. No, I think we've covered it well. And yeah, I mean, I think it's good I'll just say this. It's good for the Big Ten in terms of their perception, but also just be aware a lot of journalism is going to do this for their own, just for their own credibility and not actually reporting what's happening. So I think that you just have to be aware of that.
I think we'll see the real perception start to come out when top 25s and stuff like that come out there.
Yeah.
So,